I'd like to call our meeting to order. It is 6:34 p.m.
Just checking.
Agenda item number 2. We have a new commissioner joining us today, and I would like to take the opportunity, as we've done in the past, to just work away around our circle and give a brief introduction of who you are and what your experience or passion is, and welcome our new member. So to start, I'm Caleb Beining. I work in affordable housing as well as construction.
I'm Kyle Vogel. I own a property management company in town who a good percentage of our properties are affordable housing properties.
I'm Karen Patel. I'm a GIS person.
What's GIS?
Geospatial Information Systems.
Okay, just checking.
Yep. I map data. So if it's data or a map, I am happy.
I'm Mary Ann Dennison. I'm retired from a nonprofit affordable housing developer.
I'm Becky Reedus, and I'm a retired nonprofit director from Community Crisis Services and Food Bank. 2 years I've been.
I'm Denise Seche, and I'm new. And I teach math and computer science at the University of Iowa, and I also own properties, and I'm a foster parent.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm Carol Croats, and I am, in a sense, retired from nonprofit administration as executive director. And I also, I'm sorry, sometimes I lose my train of thought. Anyway, I worked for many years in that, and I've been on the commission for a couple of years, I guess.
I'm James Pierce. I'm a legal assistant at a law firm here in Iowa City. I've served on a couple city commissions, and I've also been on the board of a affordable housing provider.
Erica Copley, Neighborhood Services Coordinator. I'm staff.
Brianna Toole. I'm a planner here at the city.
Agenda item number 3, the considerations of the meeting minutes from the October 19th meeting. Are there any edits or corrections to the minutes from the October 19th HCDC meeting?
I would just like to say that whoever wrote these minutes did a wonderful job and should be commended. It's an awful lot of information, and I just thought it read really well and really conveyed what happened. So, so whoever is responsible for that, I appreciate that.
Want a motion?
May I have a motion to approve the October 19th 23 HCDC minutes?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4, public comment of items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? So if there are no public comments, up next, agenda item number 5. I would like to welcome Shelter House to provide an overview of the street outreach program.
Good evening. Is this on? Yep. I'm Christy Canganelli, Executive Director of Shelter House, and I'm joined here by Erin Sullivan, Housing Services Director, and Sam Brooks, who is our Outreach Specialist, Outreach Services Specialist. And we're here this evening to talk about street outreach services. And first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this evening, and we hope to be able to just really have a conversation with you about our services and the impact that we're seeing, the changes that we're noticing, and have a conversation with you that responds to the questions that just have, I think, come up over time. So first of all, just to kind of contextualize how we started Street Outreach Services, we began in partnership with the City of Iowa City. I think it was the spring of 2021. So this is a relatively new service that has been offered in our community. We had long wanted to be able to provide street outreach services services, but just did not have the capacity to do that, financial capacity. And in partnership with the City of Iowa City, they dedicate, right now it's about $35,000 annually to this work. We're able to leverage some additional federal funding that is available for shelter operations, and an allowable use is street outreach services, to be able to fund one full-time employee, Sam, and provide some supports, resource materials, supplies, and a vehicle for his dedicated use to be able to meet the needs of our community. The primary scope of work really is happening in Iowa City, although Sam is available to respond to concerns that are happening throughout Johnson County. But I'll let him talk about kind of that dedicated use, but it really is significantly focused on the Iowa City area. With that, I think that we're going to go straight to Sam, because he's got all of the details and can really speak to what we're doing best.
Yeah, so thanks for having us. Again, my name's Sam. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll start by talking about the approach and kind of our philosophy behind street outreach. I think it's critical that, when we're working with our community's most vulnerable members, to take into consideration things, the ways that we're engaging with them and the way that we're building trust and rapport for folks that have historically been failed by most of our larger institutions in some way or another. So the first step of street outreach and engagement is the engagement portion. A lot of the folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness have been staying outside for a significant amount of time. When I was looking at some of the numbers, about a quarter of the folks who are engaged in street outreach are defined as chronically homeless, which is 1 year or more in a place not meant for habitation, which is your car, under a bridge, on the street, in a tent, an abandoned building, a parking garage, many places, and have a diagnosed disability. So those are two really important factors that we look at when we're working with this population, because we understand how vulnerable things are. So my initial goal is to build rapport through a mutually respectful relationship between myself and the person who is experiencing homelessness, so that as we're working together, whatever their identified goals are, we can then work together to accomplish those goals, to navigate different systems, frankly, make sure that they can survive staying outside, and then make it to the ultimate goal of being housed permanently, stably, with wraparound services so that they can end their experience of homelessness. Engagement looks different for a lot of people. There's one individual who, I've been working with now for my entire time in street outreach, who for the first year that I was in the position, he didn't speak to me. He barked at me, and we didn't talk. And it was really, when Aaron and I would talk about ways that we can engage that were client-driven, everything I do is voluntary, ways that we can then provide services to this person. A lot of it was just about existing in the same space as them in a, very, casual way, until there was enough comfort that we could then progress to talking about very casual things. There are all kinds of different manner stories like that. This individual now, we meet every Friday and we chat a lot about grappling mostly, but that's what he chose to talk about. But
what is that?
Grappling, like wrestling and jujitsu, like martial arts is what he loves to talk about.
Okay.
But we've also been able to bring a medical provider out to come and give him a physical at a place he was comfortable at. So there are, that's kind of the general initial engagement so that we can then refer to different providers in the community. A lot of what street outreach is collaborating with different community partners, different service providers, city staff, different city departments to help this person navigate all of these systems in the safest and least have the least conflict, have the least interaction with emergency services, the least as reduced law enforcement contact and unnecessary arrests, unnecessary like ambulance trips and I don't know. That's kind of part of the collaboration of street outreach and the things that go into a single person's experience of, you know, being outside for a long period of time. Yeah, I think that's kind of the general overview. I don't know if, Erin, you have anything that
No, I'll just kind of echo what you was. It's a very delicate relationship. I think what Sam is kind of highlighting is that there are a group of individuals in our community that do not engage with services unless absolutely necessary. And then there are individuals who are experiencing homelessness who know the resources, are utilizing the resources, and just have a lot of barriers to potentially getting permanently housed. And so Sam, right, has to kind of balance his time between those individuals who are seeking him out to kind of touch base, have a contact, make sure that, like, because we talk a lot about Sam's role kind of circles the providers and the person experiencing homelessness to just make sure that they continue to connect. They know how to communicate with one another. If they don't have a phone, maybe they can find, or where the business hours that they can reach a provider at. But really, Sam spends, and we want him to spend more time really engaging with those individuals who are not kind of seeking out those services. And so that example of the individual that he gave, right, that is somebody who has never utilized shelter, winter shelter, and it's a delicate relationship that we are continuing to just kind of navigate to figure out how to build that trust, so that way the hope is that this individual will move into housing, and you know, I think what Sam didn't mention is that medical provider that came out and saw them, right? It was really helpful. We learned some things. We learned that he has some real significant vision issues. Well, at the same time, that individual got pretty scared, didn't want to provide his name, and really kind of disappeared for weeks afterwards, where Sam couldn't locate him, just because of that kind of push of that engagement. And so we just kind of share that story and this situation to know that there are many individuals in our community who are experiencing homelessness and know how to access resources and do so every day. And then there are individuals in our community who are not. And so this street outreach position is essential in reaching those individuals who are out there in our community and have been for a long period of time, probably decades, who just are not engaging. And we want to make sure that they know that there are resources, provide some of those life-saving resources to them, right? So blankets and tents and things like that. So that way, and also be able to begin that relationship.
Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about the outcomes that we're seeing with the people that we've worked with?
Yeah. As far as numbers goes, we have, in the last year, it was roughly 190 individuals who were enrolled in street outreach throughout the year. 89 of those were then moved into permanent housing from the street, either by accessing shelter eventually or straight from the street to housing. I think, that's probably the big number that is the outcome that we look at, right? Is the goal is to end the person's experience of homelessness. And for the most part, that's the rate at which we can do it so far. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So for somebody who's unhoused, and you said that they're moving into housing or into shelter, especially housing, where if they are experiencing a financial barrier, how is that resolved?
Yeah, so so there's a system in our community and across the state called coordinated entry. And so when Sam is talking about somebody moving into housing, what that means is that they are enrolled into coordinated entry, which is essentially there's no wrong door. Any human service provider in the community could put somebody in coordinated entry, and on a weekly basis we have a meeting with all of these different human service providers to determine which housing intervention or which housing program would be best for that individual based on their kind of needs. So they might have a Section 8 voucher and they just need assistance with a security deposit. Community has a program where they could pay security deposit. Shelter House has a program called Rapid Rehousing that provides a security deposit and rental assistance. So really those providers are all sitting at a table, virtual table because we do it online, and we are pulling those individuals for that program, and then that program is helping them move into housing and providing whatever resources they might need, financial assistance, case management, accessing other mainstream resources such as like food stamps, Medicaid, things like that.
So I'm guessing the ultimate goal of the individual as well as the program would be for them to be self-sufficient and feel that experience of I can, with some help though, I can be self-sufficient. Do you know what I mean? Is that a goal?
It can be a goal. So each individual's kind of plan or goal plan is created, and some individuals who maybe are experiencing short-term experience of homelessness, who are going into a rapid rehousing type of program, then yes, they probably will live independently in the community, on their own. The individuals that Sam is working with, I would anticipate that most of those individuals will receive wraparound services for a pretty significant amount of time. There's a reason people are outside for a long period of time. A big piece of that is housing related and the housing's affordability. But there's also other kind of mental health, physical health, and substance use disorders that people need support to live in housing.
Yeah.
So I'd say the goal isn't necessarily to live, to be self-sufficient in so much as it is to be as independent as possible. And so that looks different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So really trying to weave together the different services and resources that exist for people to help them to live as independently as possible in housing and to retain that housing successfully. So, and I just wanted to clarify, out of the 90 people, the 90 out of, what was it, 190? 100. So
Yeah.
we're at about 50% of those individuals that were engaged through street outreach. So this is individuals who have been living out on the streets, unsheltered, high incidence of disability, co-occurring disabilities.
75% enrolled and have a disability that is diagnosed.
And often are co-occurring, and these are any combination of serious mental illness, substance use, intellectual disability, brain injury, and then physical disabilities, and years of homelessness that we're able to successfully get into housing. And the conduit of going through shelter, that we don't consider that a housing placement. That's just people can go either through shelter to housing or straight from the street to housing. It was just that nuance I wanted to clarify.
So, and then there's the matter of just safety,
Yeah.
right? I mean, when I was working, I just knew this man who was chronically homeless and finally received an apartment and it was furnished, but he never slept in the bed. Because he hadn't slept in a bed for so many years that he didn't feel comfortable, so he just slept on the floor all the time, even though he had a bed.
I would say when we first opened Cross Park Place, the 24-unit apartment complex on Cross Park Avenue, those are individuals who were sleeping outside for years in our community, and one of the individuals there slept on the bench in front of our building for probably a month when he first moved in, just because he was uncomfortable sleeping inside.
Do a lot of the individuals that you're working with, Sam, go to either the 501 or Cross Park Place? Is that, I mean, what's your most direct route, I guess, or, you know, whoever?
Housing.
Well, when we have housing opportunities, Cross Park, 24 units, fully occupied. 501, we opened 36 units in June of last year, and I think by, was it August? September, we were at capacity. We were fully utilized, the 36 units there. So once those are full, unless a unit turns over, and the primary reason that we're seeing units turn over is really due to death of our tenants. So our units don't turn over very much. Then we're looking for units out in the community, and that means to find landlords that are willing to work with us. Through the course of the pandemic and in the response to the pandemic, there have been some very specialized additional small amounts of housing choice vouchers that have been made available, mainstream vouchers, emergency housing vouchers, and now I think 7 stability vouchers. I mean, these are the minuscule numbers of additional resources that we're trying to manage. Prioritizing these different vouchers for this particular population through coordinated entry has been an imperative, which means that they get that housing subsidy as a resource because they don't have income, or they have very extremely limited income when we're able to help them secure different mainstream benefits that they may qualify for. That was working until we lost that protection for individuals presenting a housing choice voucher as a form of payment for rent, which occurred, I think, sometime in 2022. And we're now experiencing a real, an additional barrier even for those individuals who are so disabled, have a voucher, which is a precious resource in our world, and are not able to use it as a form of payment for rent to be able to rent in our community. Because landlords are now requiring that these individuals demonstrate that they have 300% of the rent in cash income.
Wait a minute, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Irrespective of whether or not they have a voucher. So if we have a single person who's been on the street for decades, qualifies, has multiple disabilities, has a voucher in hand, and a landlord who says, sure, I'll rent to you, but show me this, my unit is $800. You show me that you have $2,400 in income, and you can rent.
Yeah.
So it's a whole new.
The first I heard of that was down in Florida about 4 years ago, and which blew my mind because the minimum wage as it is up here is still $7.25 or $7.50 an hour. So that means that literally people who are low income can't qualify. I mean, to make that kind of money is very, very difficult. So there's a lot of people who do not even qualify. I suspect there's a lot of games going on, and I don't care. I don't care. I mean, people having co-signers and things like that because of, it doesn't matter because as long as people are housed. The famous fires that happened down by, I think one of the things that, there's always, you can always see some sort of bright side. One of the things that bothers me is when I hear people say people are homeless because they don't want to, they want to live outside, they don't want to have a home. And I think that demonstrated a little bit that I think there were, if I remember right, there were 17 people who had the vouchers that didn't have a place, couldn't qualify for the income levels. And I think that was good. I think it showed the community a little bit that homelessness is it's not as simple as somebody doesn't want to be inside. And I think that was a positive, at least, that came out to educate us a little bit. Of those 101 people that you're still working with, I think you kind of answered this question, but I'm going to confirm it. They will not all enter into the winter shelter program, correct?
Not all, but I'd say a majority will.
Good.
Yeah.
The vast majority will.
Okay.
Yes.
We have really high utilization of winter shelter.
Yes.
And it also seems, I don't want to, I have a memory, Chrissy, of you talking, it might have been you were getting funding or doing an update for the 501 project, where the gap was closing, the need. Is that something that you said? And then now we have it seems like a wider gap, and so, not that you aren't running as fast, but the need is growing a lot quicker, and so how do we? I mean, what do we have to continue to do? In order to meet that need, or prevent it from growing even bigger?
Yeah. So I remember saying that.
Good, because that stuck with me for a long time, because I thought how fortunate we are to have such an agency, that really has, closed in on that gap for us. But I'm not sure you got to even go back and celebrate before the gap started growing again.
No, but
When was that? 2021?
Huh? No, I think as we were going into even the 501.
501?
Yeah.
So, I think a couple of things is that, and we talk about this a fair amount, it comes up in our board meetings and within team meetings, that it's hard to recognize the things that we're not seeing, or to acknowledge the things that we're not seeing, right? We are seeing an increase, and at least feeling that there is an increase. I'd say there is an increase of unsheltered homelessness that we're aware of in our community. There's certainly an increase in demand on our shelter resources. Even given that we have implemented homelessness prevention resources, eviction prevention resources during the course of the pandemic, and hopefully we'll be able to sustain those after this recovery period and recovery funding ends. So we've prevented hundreds and hundreds of households from entering the homeless response system and experiencing homelessness. I don't even know what it would look like if we didn't have that. We've increased our capacity to provide permanent supportive housing by building some infrastructure with bringing Cross Park Place and 501 online. That's 60 units of permanent supportive housing. And we've increased the capacity to provide that through a scattered site modality by using local landlords and partnerships with these additional housing choice vouchers. I think it's 147 total housing choice vouchers. I finally got that number imprinted in my brain. But now there are new things that are happening in and around those new increases in capacity. We were ahead of the curve as far as some other Iowa communities in developing permanent supportive housing and advancing some of these resources. So I believe that we're not seeing the increase to the same degree that communities like Des Moines and Cedar Rapids are seeing the increases, even when we correct for population size. And the fact that we have a really major feeder in our community, which is the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics, and the VA healthcare system.
And VA.
And the VA.
So, and they are giving us an incredibly complex population to work with. And we are seeing very significant increases in discharges and complexity of issues of people being discharged to the streets. That is new. So we're not to where some other municipalities are in our state, but we're definitely not maintaining the ground that I thought that we were achieving. There are other macro issues that are happening around us. So that change that we just talked about in the protection for housing, losing that protection as being able to present a housing choice voucher and have that being used as a source of income, right? That's a major hit.
I'm really surprised by that, and I'm alarmed and kind of disgusted by it.
Yep.
I preach a lot about how people on disability or SSI, they may get to $700 or $800 a month. And even if they have a voucher, they're spending a significant amount of income on rent, and that's if they can find a place because of the price range. Now there's another barrier that landlords are requiring, and I'm just really appalled by that.
And that barrier clearly has a disparate impact on veterans, individuals with disabilities, and in so much as there's a correlation with poverty, of course, households of color. So other macro issues that we're seeing, healthcare system. Healthcare system has been overrun, has never recovered. They weren't in great shape when we went into the pandemic, and they've been overrun ever since. Our emergency room department, psychiatric inpatient units, out of control. People that are not getting, people who are being discharged in all manner of conditions to the street and to shelter. Significant changes in the numbers and the complexity of issues that we're seeing and receiving from our medical institutions.
How do you receive information that somebody's being discharged, but they have the special need of being unhoused?
They just show up at our door in the parking lot.
I would say that it's something that we have improved our communication and relations with the University of Iowa and the VA ED and their hospital, but they know that they are discharging people to homelessness.
So their social services department doesn't get involved and kind of help the information get transferred? And
no, we've seen a decrease in really the social work department within hospitals in general, kind of doing the resource navigation work. It is, they're individuals coming with like really no referrals, not a lot of resources that they've been enrolled in. I think we're seeing like Medicaid really is the only resource that they're coming to shelter with.
So there are a number of different reasons why they are on overwhelm.
Yeah.
The resources that used to exist in a continuum of care of like housing placement services, residential care facilities, gone. Housing, community-based housing providers that are there that on paper look like they should be able to provide ongoing housing and supports for individuals that were cared for have all number of barriers, rules in place that prevent people from being able to access those services that, again, push more people into our shelter and then in line for our permanent supportive housing. We have community-based housing providers that sit on vacancies that will not take people that we have referred who qualify for their services, and they have barriers that prevent them from accessing. As we have gone to low barrier in Housing First, other entities have become more out of reach. So there are those kinds of system changes within the human services continuum and Department of Health and Human Services continuum. Entities that are paid for every billable unit of service to provide care and housing for people that are finding ways not to. And then we have some really good things that have changed. And by that, I mean some that may be minor, but changes within criminal justice system. So as our nation has moved towards adopting policies and interventions that are intended to reduce people who are suffering from a mental illness to the criminal justice system. So reducing overexposure to the criminal justice system, primarily meaning incarceration, right? As some of these interventions and policies have been implemented, and even locally, who is positively impacted by that change? Well, it wasn't wealthy people who had mental health issues and were being incarcerated. Their lives haven't changed, really. It's the poor who were over-incarcerated, who are suffering from mental illness and suffering with mental illness as their main provider, treatment provider, being our criminal justice system, prisons. As those individuals are successfully not being incarcerated, where are those very poor individuals landing? We didn't build up our housing system to address the housing needs for these individuals that had been functionally housed, and I say that it's a bastardized use of the word housed, in our jails and our prisons. They're on the street and in our shelters. And we're not talking about that, and we're very slow to realize that that positive intention and that positive change is having this very significant impact and changing the world of homeless services. And that, too, is having an impact on, like, what we're seeing as far as manifesting as unsheltered homelessness, because we're not able to accommodate folks in our shelters. Does that kind of help
That was
to...
good. You said there was there were positive, so it's positive for the people who are incarcerated, but not for you, is what you mean?
Well, and really not, I don't know how positive it is for them if they're living in very exposed situations on the streets.
Right.
No, I know. I mean-
Exposed, re-exposed to trauma, violence, and...
No, I understand.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's like you expand to meet a growing need, but there's a double-edged sword. The need's growing. That's not good, but you're expanding. It is good, but
Yeah.
it's very depressing.
Well, it's overwhelming because it also, and I know we're here to talk about street outreach, but that is one part, it's a new resource and intervention that's been deployed within this continuum of services that really is intended to create this system, a homeless response system, right? And really part of this move to Housing First, where we are working to end homelessness rapidly, prevent homelessness where possible, and move people to housing, immediately from the street, right? And we look at communities where they have also been successful in deploying this more like homeless response system, and where homelessness is increasing. Legislatures, policymakers are pointing to Housing First as being the cause for creating this increase. And it's absolutely not the case. We can't build ourselves out of this fast enough because we've languished, and we don't have enough housing opportunities in the market to address the needs of people who are at 0 to 30% area median income. Just trying to find those data points and find out what the real gap is difficult, and I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what that is. But just as a point of example, Denver, I was there about a month ago. It looks very different from just 2 years ago. There's always been a significant presence of unsheltered homelessness in Denver, but I've never seen it like I saw it in October. Encampments all in downtown areas, very large encampments, and they've done a lot to increase permanent supportive housing opportunities for people. But in the Atlantic, in their Chamber of Commerce, and in their local news reporting, they reported that I think it's 16% of the population of Denver has an income of $20,000 or less, and that housing opportunities that exist in Denver for individuals at $20,000 or less of income, there's a gap of between 70,000 units and 125,000 units based on the way that these different entities calculated what that gap is. How do we address that?
Until we have
variation of
lawmakers
that.
that care.
Right, there's no incentive for politicians. I mean, what's the incentive for a politician?
It's disheartening to see what has become of housing and the expense to be housed and the lagging wages. It doesn't even have to do with the federally mandated minimum wage. Just there are places and states and cities that don't pay livable wages. And I remember, 2, 3, 4 years ago when we started talking about $15 an hour and the whole world was like, oh my God, we can't pay that. That's not even a livable wage anymore. It's above 20 at this point to be able to afford the kinds of housing options that there are. I have a question. That was a little bit of soapbox, but I have a question about street outreach. So you said you get about $35,000 from the city. I'm going to assume that that's probably part of the ARPA money, or is it going to be an ongoing thing? So if you, I'm just kind of interested in, because you worked with the people that had unsheltered homeless before, but since Sam and Aaron in the street outreach program, what would you say how has that increased your success? Or, if you were going to do a pamphlet for me or a one-liner, I mean, what would you say?
Elevator speech.
Yeah, the elevator speech. I mean, what would you say that it's really done for this group of folks?
Well, I'll let Sam come up with the elevator pitch, but I'll give an example of what Street Outreach has done. So when we opened Cross Park, it took 6 months to be able to, from January to June, so for all the units to be filled. And Chrissy mentioned the length of time that it took to fill the 501 units, and that is almost entirely because of Street Outreach, because the Street Outreach the specialist was out engaging with those individuals, was readying them for housing. So the amount of work that Sam does in terms of helping people gather those essential documents like a birth certificate, a social security card, an ID, and then also having those conversations of like, okay, how do you get into an apartment, right? Oh, we should go look at it. We have, there's going to be these things that you're going to have to sign. Really talking them through that entire process. That was essential in moving very quickly and getting people housed and moving them into 501. So, that was like a kind of a really like micro example of like how Street Outreach benefited, like was a huge benefit in that instance to moving people quickly into housing when it became available. And obviously there was multiple units available in this instance, and Sam kind of has the challenge now of it's kind of finding those individual units. But what would you say is?
And that's where I think it's kind of shifted to now when there's not this pool of units available, is to create a support network and that weave of services that Chrissy is talking about in the interim when somebody has engaged in services and started to get to a place where they're ready for housing when housing is available, creating a support network in the interim so that, again, they can be safe, they can provide them with survival items and help them interact in a healthier way with the rest of the community. And I mean, frankly, because of Street Outreach, I think we know just about every single person in our community. I guess you don't know who you don't know, but we're pretty confident that, in some form or another, we know the majority of people who are living unsheltered in our community, where before I think it was sporadic here and there, or I can't say for sure, but that level of like engagement and frankly, just having that support in the long term is then what, like, when
you meet them at their place of need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
doing exactly.
And even if it's a very small community, meaning word travels fast, and so what Sam has experienced, right, is that somebody will meet somebody who's experiencing homelessness, and they'll be like, "Hey, do you know Sam?" And they say no. That person is seeking out Sam, calling Sam to get him connected with that individual. Because of the partnerships that we now have with the city, where we meet on a monthly basis with like numerous departments, and even outside of the city. We've had now meetings with the DNR, which and lots of different other entities in our community who all know of now Street Outreach, know of Sam, have his number. And so when there is somebody who, whether they're in town for one night because they were at the bus stop and they're leaving town again, or they are somebody who's been in our community and just has kind of been in places that we don't frequent, there are resources, or there are clear partnerships that can reach out to Sam and or get him connected with that individual. And I think that's that's probably one of the biggest changes, is having a centralized person that everybody knows and all these different entities and departments know to say. Even at this point, like the University of Iowa, different kind of sports complex know of Sam and his what his role is, because and they are able to reach out to him.
That's very cool.
You know, I was just talking with Brianna today about this 0 to 30% that you mentioned, and I just have to believe that there's something that we can do to help start a process, as long as it may take, to find some sort of solution to this, because it seems to me like, I feel it personally, I fall in that category. I feel it personally. It feels like Iowa City has become an exclusive place to live, and that sometimes I feel like I'm not wanted because I can only afford X amount of rent, and that's even with assistance. And I used to be really ashamed that I had to have help, but I'm not anymore. And I'm not embarrassed anymore. It's what it is because of my disabilities. But there's got to be something that we can do, because I know the city has a commitment to finding affordable to having affordable housing for people in a place where they want to live. I think I read that someplace not too long ago. And I just have to think that somebody who has a little bit of power maybe can start quantifying how many people this actually involves, and trying to work out solutions to find this. I'm just really committed to that, and I'm saddened to hear about the people that you work with who have the vouchers and still can't find a place. Very disheartening.
So I have a couple questions that I have. And maybe I missed it, but is that voucher change, was that a federal law change? Was that a state law change? Was that just something that's happened
State.
organically with landlords, or?
It's a state. So Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and Des Moines all had a local ordinance in place that protected the use of a housing choice voucher as a form of income. So protected households that were presenting that, right? And it was it in 2022? It's a blur. I can't remember when the legislature made the decision to remove that, the ability of municipalities to have that local
Gotcha.
control,
Okay.
which is, very interesting given the history of Iowa. And
So it's part of that larger conversation of the state removing
and then
local control from.
they had a rollout period where it didn't go into place until a certain time, I think, in last year. And we've definitely seen the impact.
Yeah.
It was very disappointing to learn that it was a local landlord and high-profile individual in our community that led that campaign, that campaigned the legislature and led that effort for that policy change.
My other question was something that you said earlier has been kind of marinating in my brain, which is that the turnover you see in the two particular complexes that you've developed, the largest cause of turnover is death?
In the permanent support housing.
And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, because that struck me as...
Yeah, Erin, do you want to?
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple. So Cross Park Place, we saw, I don't know, any number is a good number, but like a good number of individuals who passed away within the first kind of 18 months of that program. I think that there's a couple reasons. One is the population who live at Cross Park are definitely at this point, they're aging in place. They're an older demographics, I would say. We're seeing individuals more from 60 to 80, just based on kind of the length of the life, the length of time, and also the eligibility requirements for that program at the time were individuals who were frequent users of our systems. And so those were individuals who had pretty significant healthcare costs. And so those were individuals that were already, what we were seeing from kind of the length of time living outside, right, their frailty and their general health, and then and just kind of then ongoing kind of chronic health conditions. I think that there's also this, which is not necessarily like proven medically, but there's this you watch people who have kind of protected themselves for really long amounts of time outside. So they've had to survive. They're getting their basic needs met on a daily basis, and that's really it. And they're really kind of they're going to the ED when it's absolutely necessary, and otherwise their tolerances for themselves and how to take care of themselves are pretty high. And then you watch people move into housing, and they start to kind of let that guard down a little bit. They start to engage in healthcare, which is great. Those are all really positive things. But the body doesn't have to protect themselves as strongly as they were outside. And so, it would be really interesting to see what kind of studies are out there, or as permanent supported housing continues to be evidence-based practice with long-term, results and outcomes to look at, what that data looks like. But that is just anecdotally what I am seeing as somebody who is watching these individuals kind of their bodies just not be able to handle the amount of trauma that they've experienced outside for the length of time that they have.
So when somebody goes into permanent supportive housing, they leave, obviously, if they die, but incarcerated. Are there any other reasons like they would leave, and is that rate relatively low? I mean, you don't have to go through them, but otherwise they can stay
forever.
They have a
follow
lease
the rules
that's
and
renewable. It doesn't look like, it looks like a lease like anybody else would have. And that's one of the foundations. We've had a small number of people who have left housing. The terminology in HUD is moved on or moving on. They've been able to take that project-based voucher and move it into just a voucher
housing
that
choice
moves
voucher.
with them, and move out into housing in the community or locate closer to family. And we consider those really successful exits. There have been a very small number of individuals that have had pre-existing criminal records and have been arrested, gone to jail.
And then there's individuals who need a higher level of care. So with that aging in place, potentially need to just have more in-home supports that we can't provide, and will go to a higher level of care.
And I'd say that's where we're struggling now, is seeing more people that have higher needs than really permanent supportive housing was ever intended to address, and need 24/7 on-contact care, and those resources do not exist anymore.
Well, then that's the other thing I was going to say too, is that I'm glad that you alluded to the fact that the people you're seeing are so much higher need, because that's something that I even saw a few years ago when I was on the board of affordable housing provider. People would come to us, but we would say we can't meet your needs. We would maybe be affordable based on a voucher, but we can't meet all of the other non-financial needs that you have. And I think that's the struggle that we've seen a big increase in the last few years, is being able to afford the rent is not the only problem.
The vulnerability of the individuals that we are serving, and not just based on their physical abilities, is significantly increased. I mean, it is really challenging to watch and witness some of the limitations to our services based on the individuals who are in our buildings, because and as Chrissy mentioned, right, it has a lot to do with the decrease in just the institution beds available in our state. And so when you watch entities have to decrease their beds from 54 to 16, all because of settings rules that the state is putting out, right? That's saying you need to have certain ratios, and we don't want too many people with disabilities living in the same space together. And that impacts where people can stay, right? And so there are all really good reasons for why the state limits maybe the number of people who can live in a building together. But instead of we're just reducing the number of beds. We're not adding anywhere else, right? And I think one of the things that also we saw is, so you have this kind of a next phase of kind of deinstitutionalization, right? Where we're closing these beds, but we're not providing any infrastructure to the community-based services within those HAB homes and within those other kind of residential community settings to be able, for not just in terms of the number of beds, but also the training that the staff in those buildings need, right? And then on top of it, you have a pandemic that like completely wipes out the workforce that then is now needing to be rebuilt and retrained. And so though you already were at a place where your workforce needed to increase their skill, and now you're even lower because you're having to retrain individuals right from the beginning. And so, you know, we could sit here and talk probably for another hour of all of the examples of individuals that you're talking about whose needs are way beyond the scope of services in a shelter and even in a permanent supported housing building. But we are doing what we can because they have nowhere else to go. Like, these are not individuals who we can say, your needs are too high, we'll see you later, because they're just going to be in the building right next door, which is our services, right? Or they're going to be in the building across the street in winter shelter, or they're going to be engaging with SAM, right? So like, no matter where they are in our community, we're serving them, and that's our mission too.
I just have one more question for Sam. Do you anticipate that through the people that you work with, that you've met, that there will be some who won't want to go into the winter housing, the winter shelter? They would rather stay where they are?
Yeah, there's a small number of people who stay outside every year. The third weekend in January, nationally, there's a point-in-time count that homeless response services all participate in. And so that's something, because it's the time of year where there are the most shelter emergency beds available, you're able to then like accurately count the number of people who spend the entire winter outside.
What can you do to help those folks?
We provide quite a bit of survival items, tents, sleeping bags, hand warmers, gloves on an ongoing basis. Those are all things that as you use them, you're going to need more consistently to make it through an Iowa winter. Heaters, propane, whatever that person has identified as a way to survive through the winter.
You can go on their website and look at their Amazon wish list.
Our street count in Johnson County has stayed pretty much between 10 to 15 people on that last Wednesday in January. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very informative. You have a great job, Sam. I hope you like it a lot. I think you're wonderful.
Stay.
Thank you.
Me too. Yes, me too. Yeah, and just as so Sam, if you have any other questions, I think Sam is a great, or if there's individuals or a business owner or a property owner that has concerns about somebody, I would always just refer them to Sam, so that way he can make sure that there's that resource going out and just connecting with them, so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very, very informational.
I wish I'd like to take these. Oh, they're pointed to us.
I can read through that.
No, we could read them. I could read them.
So we know where we're assigned.
We still do have quite a bit to get through, but on to agenda item number 6. Tonight we're considering a recommendation to revise the aid to agency definition and eligibility, as we've previously discussed.
All right, so this item is kind of a result of a question that came up last year. Last year during the legacy funding, there are 2 agencies that are legacies that were not awarded funds initially by HCDC, and HCDC expressed that they wanted them to be able to apply for the emerging funds at that point. However, we learned that because of a resolution that's in place, they were not eligible. And so there's still this proposal addresses the one agency that is not funded with legacy agencies, but as it sits is still not eligible for emerging agencies. So we propose revising the regulations and to allow their eligibility. And then as we did that, we just kind of cleaned up some of the language to read as we're currently offering the program. The previous resolution for emerging agencies was done in 2018, and that was prior to some of the big changes to the program that took place in about 2020 with our consolidated plan. The consolidated plan didn't really address the emerging agencies. So what we're proposing is to, if a legacy is not funded through the legacy process, they would still be eligible for emerging. The agency that would be kind of the only one that fits this category right now is Community and Family Resources. We didn't make any other substantial changes to the definitions that are different from how we're operating the program now, just some clarifications. I do want to note that this isn't the subcommittee's work. That's kind of a separate process you'll hear a little bit more about, and we'll take changes through probably in January or later, result of that process. This is just brought forward now because we have the emerging agency funding round, and so we want to know if HDC wants to allow that agency to apply for emerging agencies, and if these changes look okay, then we would take that to council.
Would it be any legacy agency that doesn't receive aid to agency funds is eligible to apply? That's what we're saying for emerging agency funds? Yes?
Yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, so we had a definition of emerging agencies that from the resolution that's in your packet. But so now it's going to be any nonprofit that's not receiving legacy funding in a given year, and they have to be a 501c3 in good standing as well. So legacy agencies aren't eligible for emerging funds, but a legacy that's not receiving the funding would be eligible.
That would have been helpful last year.
I don't have a problem with it. I don't think that emerging agency funds title, name, label, whatever, makes a lot of sense. But I don't have a problem with them being able to tap that pool of funds. In fact, there's been some time in the past couple of years it felt like we didn't give as much money away as we could have. Maybe there was available money. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
So we can do up to 5% of the aid to agency budget for emerging agencies. The name was kind of derived to be intended for new agencies, but then as the process evolved and we established the actual legacies, then we realized that there was groups that weren't really fitting in either category, so it kind of became the catch-all for anyone who wasn't a legacy. So that has changed a little bit, and we're open to name suggestions anytime.
I think we might tackle that a little bit in subcommittee. I mean, not coming up with names, but just making a recommendation that that's something that needs to be addressed in the future. But I'm not sure what'll happen.
I just want to make sure that we, as the reviewing body that recommends to the council, do our due diligence so that, I mean, I guess my question is, as staff for the emergency, I'm sorry, my voice is terrible. The emerging agency, you receive the ongoing reports or whatever? Mm-hmm. Okay. We need to know if you have any concerns about any agency that's received money. Because, you know, we see the applications, we do the recommendations, and then that's it. I mean, they don't get a lot of money, but I think it really behooves us to say, you know, we believe that these applications are worthy, and we know what we're talking about, and take it to council.
Yeah,
But otherwise, I don't have any problems with this.
Any concerns about maybe an eligibility or their compliance, we would put in the staff notes when you guys review that. So
I would also be in favor of the revision.
You need a motion? Does anybody need a motion?
I make a motion to accept the recommendations for changes as proposed by staff.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item number 7, the consideration of approval of the FY25 application materials.
So I have a question about the emergency. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I kept doing that today on the phone, saying emergency instead of emergency.
Emerging. So, with what we just recommended, the emerging agencies, the definition and eligibility is they must be a 501c3. Why then on the application does it say, you could say you're a public for-profit, faith-based, Chodo, other?
Are you looking at the emerging application or the CDBG and home?
I think I'm looking at the, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at the, yeah, I'm looking at the emerging. It's number 2,
Okay.
right?
Let me see it.
Am I in the wrong one? It's this one.
Yeah, we could probably update that. Yeah, we'll update it. And if you have any other changes to either application, we'll make the final edits and they're posted online. So we have to go through the process to do the online application anyway, so that's easy to fix.
And then I also have a comment on the home and CDBG application, of course, for mainly the scoring criteria. On number 5 for the scoring criteria, 76% to 99% leveraging of funds, that's a lot. For basically how much, you know, I don't know, I mean, that's just these are just comments. I think overall it looks really good.
It's up to you
Some of
guys.
these things, just so people who know me are going to understand that I'm going to bring up the same stuff every year until stuff gets changes, but anyway.
Sure. We did not change the scoring criteria from last year, but I will say when we did change it the year before, it took a lot of, it used to be that leverage question was such a huge portion of the scoring. It really swayed it if you didn't have a large amount of leverage. And I think last year it did help with the distribution of the scoring. I think it took a little bit of weight away from that one question.
Well, and I think some other things can balance that out if the application's really good. And then in number 7, I think if we see an application and we get to number 7 and the agency does not have the resources or fiscal capacity to complete the project, I wouldn't give them any money. I mean, and they don't get any points, but still they could score pretty well. I mean, that's pretty serious, in my opinion.
So are you suggesting a change from like A and D, a 20 or a 0? They get a 0 on that, or it knocks their application out of consideration?
Well, I'm just saying, for me personally,
No, I think it makes sense.
if I thought that was a 0, just so y'all know, I'm going to recommend they don't get any money. But you guys can do, you know, I mean, it's kind of consensus building. And then this is the one that I bring up every year since I've been on the commission, which is under Part 3, number 8. So what income are you targeting? My whole thing is that these are federal funds. The federal government has the regulations that everybody has to follow. Complying with federal regulations can be very, very time-consuming.
Onerous, yeah.
Why does the city put more regulations on top of what the federal regulations already are? Everybody has to be under 80% for CDBG. For home funds, there is a formula that the federal government gives the applicant for instance, rental housing, and these are more restrictive. So for instance, and I say this every year, I know, but if there's an affordable housing provider that has a rental unit available and the city said that the person that moves into that house has to be under 30% area median income, and you get a family that comes in and applies and they make $2 over the 30% AMI and you don't have another place for them, you have to tell them that they make too much money, that they don't qualify. But they're between 31 and 50. So you could house that family. But for this, you know, I mean, it just doesn't seem like if people are fine with it, I'm okay too. But It's just adding more regulations on top of what they're federally required to do. So, but we did this last year.
Yeah, I think
And
I'm
we
following
changed
what
it
you're
a little
saying.
bit, but not enough.
I think some of the hard part is using one application and one scoring criteria to do housing and public facilities projects. Sometimes that's a hard combination to have something that fits both. If you had a perfect world, what would that question look like?
Is everybody that you're going to serve under 80%, or do you, are you aware of the home program regulations, especially for rental? Because if you get a home application for home ownership, more than likely, it's going to be between 50 and 80.
Yeah.
But for the rental, if there's so many units, then so many have to be below 60. Right? If it's like 5, if you do 5 home units for rental, they all have to be under 60, or you can have one under 80. I mean, I can't remember the whole formula, but there's a formula.
Mm-hmm.
So are you suggesting that that question could be what primary what primary percent of median income person are under 80%?
I'm just saying,
I mean, how would you reword
the
that question?
application going to follow the federal, what are the federal regs for that? I don't know. I don't know how to reword it. I'm just saying, my question is, and this has been going on for a long time, since the home program started and the city got home funds. They're adding more stringent regulations than the federal government requires. And my basic question is why?
I think this one, I mean, it really depends on how people submit their applications. Like this one is really just helping us score and determine who the project is serving. But anecdotally, like some of the most recent projects we've done are just at the max of 60%. So like if someone's applying and they're just saying, we're going to serve someone at 60%, not all of them have that preference category of 30% AMI anymore, but I have seen that quite a bit in past projects.
But if you're going to do a rental project, and you want to make sure you can house everybody that you're going to house, you pick 51 to 60, so you only get 10 points. But in reality, you may be serving everybody at under 30.
Right.
But if you restrict yourself, everybody's chasing points on these applications.
Right.
Or I hope they are. You know, that's, you lose 10 points.
I think some of the root of this was the city steps, isn't it? Incentivizing the 0 to 30%. So maybe some of that coming up next year with the new city steps plan, we could definitely look at that. But I'm open to changing it
It's
also
been
with
this
you.
way for,
It's up to the commission to
It's always
decide
just-
how you guys want to
That's
score
okay,
that.
keep bringing it up.
it's always just been a bugaboo for me, and I used to bring it up when I was an applicant, and now I can bring it up when I'm a commissioner.
Yeah, if you guys have suggestions, we're happy to take them. It's just, I don't want to try to figure out something that
Anyway.
maybe isn't quite what you wanted, so.
Those are my, otherwise I think the application looks great.
Are we ready to take a motion or any other unsaid opinions? May I have a motion to approve the FY25 application materials?
So approved, so moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item number 8, staff and commission updates. Are there any updates?
Well, I was just going to give you a quick update on the subcommittee.
Nice report. Thank you for the report.
Yeah, we had a good meeting. We really broke down the application, and in a nutshell, the biggest changes that I think we're recommending is profile information that the agencies can do outside of the application process, so it reduces that application. And the second area would be recommendation that we get, that the city does not purchase, we don't like the outcomes. That, and hopefully United Way will get rid of that portion, do something else. That we allow the agencies to through the application process, indicate how they're going to measure their program. How do they define success?
Yes.
And that can be very, very simple, and I think that would help us a lot to be able to get that information, because some of you may not know that if an agency has multiple programs and they're getting funding from multiple entities, United Way, Iowa City, Johnson County, Coralville, they're going to have different outcomes. So their outcomes may not even match what we're giving them money for. So their outcomes might be on mental health, where we're giving them money for food assistance. That's one that I can think of. So I think it'll help us a great deal. So we have that. We're going to be going through some of the rules and such. These are all proposals. And we have another meeting on Monday, and then we'll schedule probably one last meeting. I have a timeline from staff to keep me on schedule, which I appreciate a lot. So we can make a final report to the commission. And the report's going to be recommendations. These are the things that we'd like to see done. But the agencies were really engaged. And so if you haven't read through everything, I hope that you will, because there were some great comments in there and some feedback, I think, for us also to consider with regard to the scoring process that they gave us input on that. So, any questions about any of the information? Okay.
I have something, but it's a request. I noticed that the next meeting is January 18th, 2024. I'm actually having surgery on January 17th. Would the commission or the staff consider meeting before that, or on the 25th? So meet the Thursday on January 11th or January 25th. Or I don't even know if that's possible to do.
I don't know either. No one's ever asked. Have you run into that before?
I want to have a meeting sooner.
I think it's up to the commission. If everyone is agreeable, we can reschedule.
Unless you don't want me here on the 18th. I mean, it might go faster.
What
Either would be
business are we
fine with
going
me.
to be taking care of in January?
The report from the subcommittee is going to be one of them. And to tell you the truth, it would be nice to have Mary Ann here, because she's got that background and expertise also. So I'm fine with either way. If you did it a little bit earlier, I'll have to alter that, but that's not a huge deal, because we'll have met probably finally, I think, our final meeting in December, I hope. So it shouldn't be a big deal.
If I remember, I feel like we moved meetings on the last commission I served on. It was just a matter of like, everyone agreed to move the meeting. So,
I'm okay with the 11th.
There's plenty of,
I won't be available the 25th, but
Okay.
there's plenty
11th
of
would be better,
time
but-
to post a public notice.
I'd rather have the 11th.
yeah, 11th would be work for me.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Caleb, are you okay with that?
Yeah, either works.
Okay.
I have just one other update. It's a little bit early for this, but in the packet, I put together a calendar for the FY25 cycle. You guys don't really need to do anything for this until January, but just to kind of start putting some of those times on your radar of what HCDC will need to do for that funding cycle when it comes to reviewing the applications, getting your scores in, those kind of things. So just throwing that out there. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was that we were not planning to do a February meeting this year for HCDC. So we would do the Q&A in writing with the agencies like we did for legacy aid to agencies. And then Erica and I are setting up some time if anyone wants to meet with us one-on-one to go through scoring or questions for the FY25 round. We'll have time to do that in February instead of having a formal meeting. So that's in the packet for you.
I have a question about that. So I think the questions are important, and I've shared this with you and maybe the commission before, that I always have questions, always, that I submit, but then I have more questions when I review. sometimes I think it'd be helpful, is it possible to have a small work session before the questions go out where people who want to attend it could attend it, where we come up with the questions together, we've all reviewed the application and we come up with the questions. I would just like to see, I guess my goal is to try and find a way to have more robust questions, or get all the questions that we need to have answered, or try and hit that marker a little bit more carefully. And I don't know if that's possible.
Is a work session treated the same as a meeting in terms of public access and notification and all that kind of stuff?
I believe if there's a quorum and we're talking about HCDC business, it would be a public meeting. So the difficulty with that would be your timing. If you're meeting January 11th and the Q&A is in February, like, could this be addressed during the January meeting? Like, would it be an option to have?
Okay, how about as a secondary proposal that, well, you probably do. We submit the questions to you, then do you submit them to us ahead of time? So I don't know if I don't know. It just, I wish that it was more robust. And I'm going to try and do a better job myself at reviewing the applications, rather than just even reading through them, but actually reviewing them, because that's when I get the questions, and then it's too late to ask them. I've missed the window.
Well, we'd encourage anyone that if you want to walk through the applications with staff, that's kind of why we set up the office hours, especially we have a lot of new commission members. Just if you want to just walk through applications with us and we can talk through them, and maybe that will help you develop your questions as well. That's what I would suggest.
And your report really helps me a lot.
Oh, yeah, I love the report.
In the past, has there been good participation, and I don't know how you define good, for the applicants' workshops, for attendance at those?
Yeah, usually we have a pretty good idea of who's going to apply based on who attends the applicant workshop, so.
I'm ready to go.
So if we're done with our updates, agenda item number 9 is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Everybody.